Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, LawVu's community for in-house legal professionals. LawVu's mission is to accelerate the evolution of the in-house legal profession, and with this podcast, we showcase modern legal leaders from across the globe. We explore their unique journeys and how they're driving the transformation of our new profession. Join David Lancelot, LawVu's Chief Legal Officer and Executive Vice President of Advocacy, as he explores the cutting edge of in-house leadership. This is the Legal Leaders Podcast.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. I'm David Lancelot, your host, the CLO and EVP Advocacy at LawVu. And I have the truly great pleasure to have with me here today, Brian Levey. Brian and I go way back. We'll dive into that shortly. Brian, thank you for being here.
David, thanks for having me. Great to see you. We go back a ways. 15 plus years.
Easy. Yeah, easy.
Crazy how time flies.
Yes, no, it is indeed. And backstory that is pretty extraordinary. So it's a real honor to have you on the show. Brian, currently a senior advisor to Upwork after spending 12 years as their CLO and Chief Business Affairs Officer. And he's held titles, and I think, pause and listen to this one, CFO, Interim Chief People Officer. He oversaw the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, and the InfoSec team. So I'm not sure there are any other roles in the business that are...
There were plenty, but it was fun. It was fun getting to sit in the shoes of others.
I've said this, and I'll say it again, business person with legal skills. I think you're absolutely that person and exactly the kind of person that I want to showcase on this program. A business leader with legal skills. So thank you again for joining us today, bro.
Thanks, David. Great to be here. And you're very kind with the intro.
Let's set the Wayback Machine to the cubicles at eBay. I think it was building 4, right? Which we used to call...
Oh, your jewelry building?
Jewelry. Yes. Old jewelry. Before they rebranded the buildings.
Yeah, for sure. It's been rebranded many times since.
I liked when the buildings had cool names instead of numbers. But... So set the Wayback Machine for those sort of not the most inspiring cubicles, I have to say, but
very Spartan.
Certainly inspiring place to work. And you were there a few years longer than me. And you certainly got there at a much more important, I don't know if you'd call it that, a much more historic almost time for eBay and Silicon Valley. So you joined as the as eBay's first dedicated corporate in-house attorney. In 2000.
And I will say that's probably a little misleading because technically true, but my boss was one of the better corporate attorneys in the country, Mike Jacobson.
True.
Mike was general counsel.
That's right. So
always had the benefit of his mentorship, but also someone who knew a whole lot more than me looking over my shoulder too, at the same time.
Yeah. And I got to say, I had a similar mentor in Karen Schwab when I joined eBay. So quite a bench there. So you joined as, let's say, Mike J's first dedicated corporate in-house attorney in 2000, and you helped scale the operations of eBay from way back, and this is really quite hard for me to even comprehend, 900 employees at the time and $400 million in revenue to over 30,000 employees and over $16 billion in revenue, while carrying out as head of corp legal at eBay over 75 strategic transactions worth over $15 billion, including the PayPal acquisition, which is obviously pretty historic and turned eBay into the powerhouse that it is today. And it's fair to say you bought pretty much every company that I worked for in a 10-year career at eBay. I worked for eBay Classifieds, which was a conglomeration of a bunch of different companies around the world, and you basically bought them all. So my career is very much rolled up into yours. Thank you.
It's much easier to buy than to build. And hats off to you, David, for building those into the behemoth that the classifieds business became years later.
It did, eventually. Yes, eventually. But we couldn't have done it without you, of course, and your team. Many of the people on your team, and I think it's worth saying, right? People who worked for you are all over the place in Silicon Valley doing enormous jobs and around the world, and have benefited from your leadership as well. So I think one of the things that I always look for, and I think everybody always looks for in true leadership, is a group of people that that would say, I'd absolutely work for that team if Brian was leading it. I got to raise my hand and say the same thing. I'd work for that.
Very kind. It is, I think, one of the best things about and most satisfying things about the job is seeing sort of these folks who've been teammates elevate themselves, elevate their careers, take on these much bigger roles over time. And I think it is by far the most satisfying part of it all. Obviously, it's fun and rewarding to build these businesses, but to see these colleagues / friends, good friends, take things to the next level is wonderful. And it's also great just keeping in touch with folks, right? So even after we're not working in the same cubicle or on the same Zoom calls anymore, it's fantastic to be able, just like us, to be able to grab coffee. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast. It's all about those relationships, that trust built in the trenches.
Yep.
And being just osmosis and me learning as much from them as they've learned from me.
100%.
So it's truly been rewarding.
Yes. And I think if you're out there and you're looking for a new role, or if you're considering, where to go in the legal profession, I think one of the most important things to look for is that leadership where you can tell the leader cares about the people working for them more than they do about their own particular path. And I think I guess you call that selfless, right? Selfless leadership.
Yeah. And I think, David, that's a great segue into something that is near and dear to my heart. And I didn't even realize this framework existed because I think it came out, I was reading 25 years or so ago. It's called the trust quotient.
Yep.
And I heard about it in a legal leaders meeting maybe 8+ years ago. And it really narrowed things down for me and came up with this equation. And I'm not an equation type person, but if you think about the say-do ratio as the numerator, right?
Yep.
How credible, how reliable, how comfortable are people coming to you? That's the numerator. And if you divide that by, okay, the self-interested part, me over team, which detracts from that overall number, I think that's the key to taking it to the next level. So it is so much about that trust quotient, not just with your colleagues who are on your team, who are on the exec team, on the board. It's also with customers. And I just think it's a really great thing to have. And we can deep dive into it if you want a little bit later, where I've faltered along the way and some learnings along the way. But that to me is key. Trust is, I like to call it the moat, both professionally and I think for any business, especially in this age of AI. Like, how do you get beneath sort of the algorithms and the computers and really make it more human and have that trust element with your customers?
100%. 100%. Couldn't agree more. And I love how you put it there, Brian. And I'm absolutely poaching that for many things I say in the future. The trust quotient. And I can still remember our CFO at eBay getting up on stage and talking about the say-do ratio, right? It just reminds me of what a business leader with legal skills you are. That is part of your vocabulary just as much as you've been a CFO.
I was a hack CFO when we were private. I had a great team around me.
Yes, no, indeed. And that's absolutely part of it, right? Knowing that hiring people better than you and giving them the ability to shine. I think one of the things I really noticed about eBay was how many people there were who you could say, I'm going to take you out of here and give you this opportunity. And they would just supernova, right? Supernova. And I think having grown up as a professional in that environment, it almost trains you to be able to find and give people the opportunity because they had such a deep bench.
There was such talent density. And that's obviously a phrase that I didn't know at the time, but I've since come across. And if you think about just the folks working there around that time, just incredible, and certainly learned so much from the team and really felt like we made a lot of good impact helping people around the world figuring out this virtual marketplace where they could do something that no government could do for them. As Maynard Webb used to say, we're breaking new snow every day. And that was the exciting part about it. And you certainly carried the torch in building the classifieds business.
Yep. Yeah. Super fun time. So let's get into the Wayback Machine one more time. And I'm going to ask you, Brian, so what was it that got you interested in the legal profession and the in-house legal profession in particular because I find that everybody has a different route. This isn't something that certainly a few years ago, there was no on-ramp. There was no standard way to become an in-house lawyer. There were no classes. There were no podcasts, et cetera. So what was it that inspired you to get into the in-house profession?
First, maybe I can go briefly into why legal and why the legal profession. And I will say it was not one that I had wanted to do since being a little pup. I was all set, econ major in college, all set to go to business school, maybe dating myself a little. The stock market crash of 1987 comes along. Wall Street is obliterated, no investment banking jobs. That is the path I thought I was going to go, because there were really no tech companies at the time worth even thinking about, unlike today. Pivot a little. Why don't I go to intern for Stanford? Had a program at the time, Stanford in Washington, its first semester. And there was an internship program with one of the SEC commissioners there, Joe Grunfest, who really took me under his wing. Not major stuff that I did in probably this 10 or 12 week internship, but just to be exposed to some of the decision making and the like was really wonderful. And then that internship became the basis for my honors thesis senior year. That honors thesis became the basis for me working at the Federal Reserve Board as a research assistant based on that same topic. And then lo and behold, Commissioner/Professor Grunfest then is teaching at Stanford Law School. And I become his research assistant during law school. So taking that full circle, but always trying to learn from him. And he certainly had the business hat on as well. And then following him and then going into the law firm, but then moving in-house. And then years later, he put in a good word to Mike Jacobson at eBay when I was applying for the eBay role in 2000. So things come full circle, but talk about relationships compounding, in this case, probably over a decade, but also keeping that business mindset in mind. How can I choose law as a vehicle for solving business problems, period, and not as a path in its own right? But that is why legal.
Yeah. And I often find that people who are very successful in-house practice have some kind of business background before law school. Some of them, and particularly outside the United States, have a background in a secondment in business, go out to a client, right, as they would call them at a law firm, and spend time there and realize, actually, this is way more fun than working in a law firm.
Yeah, completely.
But others, like yourself, are actually experienced in business even before they hit the...
And this is also someone who at 8 years old was arbitraging baseball cards at card conventions and in high school. Following the financial markets and buying some stocks here and there. So there was always that interest.
Sure. So when it came time to start writing up the documents for the filings at various corporations, they were like, this is my happy place.
Forget this litigation stuff that you really only get exposure to, or at least back then, it's obviously heavy litigation focus. Knowing early on with Professor Grunfest that wanted to go more the business law path, I think was a nice realization.
So
mock trials and all, a good experience, but knew that wasn't the path.
Yes. No, indeed.
And then as far as in-house, I will say went to the big law firm, got great training, but at the end of the day, you're writing these memos or marking up these long documents, and you just get the feeling, is anyone reading it? Does it matter? And at the time, you don't even know whether you're providing good judgment or not because you don't have that pattern recognition. It's just a way for me to think about, I learned at the law firm, I don't want to write the memo. I want to be the one making the decision. And I think that going in-house really provided that sense of impact for me, being able to decide a little bit more. And obviously as a younger in-house attorney, you're not going to be able to do it on day one, but it is nice not to have your day measured in billables in really, how can you impact the business? How can you be more creative? Build systems, and in my mind, how can you make the business more self-sufficient, right? Not just draft memos. How can you live with the consequences of your own judgments and having that feedback loop and not just sending that CYA memo to the client and not knowing what happened?
Yep.
But at the same time, the law firm as an M&A attorney and corporate securities attorney, it's great training. You get to spot issues really well. You have to get up to speed on new business models when you're doing M&A and the like. So I think that translated well when I did finally move in-house, first at MGM Studios and then to eBay and then to Upwork. Understanding the business at a deeper level is, I think, the most important asset any in-house attorney can bring to the table. And to be able to be at a company like eBay, as you mentioned, first dedicated corporate attorney, doing tons of deals, and then at Upwork, being the first attorney, and then taking it from there just has been extremely gratifying to work at these companies that really are providing economic opportunity to folks all over the globe. In eBay's case for goods, in Upwork's case for work.
And maybe it's worth, I think everybody knows eBay, right? You'd be surprised to find someone in the middle of the Sahara Desert who didn't know what eBay was and probably had purchased something for one of the things they're interested in on eBay.
Beanie Babies.
Yes, they probably have a Beanie Baby collection. But Upwork, I know Upwork, I've used Upwork, but I think it's worth you explaining what Upwork is and how you were a big part of building that business as well.
So Upwork, formerly called Odesk, and Odesk had been around for a while. Odesk merged with a company called Elance, which is a competitor shortly after I joined. It's really, think of it as a freelancer marketplace, connecting customers, clients from SMBs to Fortune 50 companies with the talent, wherever that may be, all over the globe in over 180 countries. And really providing that platform and marketplace to connect to strangers and to be able to have, it's all knowledge work. So there's no person delivering anything to you. There's no one coming in a uniform and the like, but how do you connect millions around the globe? I believe last year there was over $4 billion worth of freelancer earnings on the platform. To be able to see that through different eras, right? From the fax era, which I believe is when Elance was created in the late 90s, to mobile, the cloud, and now AI, and being able to pivot throughout all of that, I think was extremely satisfying. And being able to just be part of a company that dealt with both work and payments, two of the most highly regulated things across the globe, was certainly an existential challenge. And I think the team, which I started, I was the successor to a prior general counsel and then built the team up from there. But to be able to grow, to be able to service the business, to be able to figure out, okay, we live in a world of limited resources. How can we prioritize what we do? How can we allow the business to be more self-sufficient on the stuff that is lower on the heat map, lower probability of happening or lower magnitude of something bad happening? How do we really focus in that upper right-hand corner, high magnitude, high probability? I think really helps create that internal flywheel just to be able to focus and prioritize, because we don't want to do everything for everyone. That is not a good use of time. The team's going to get burned out. We're going to slow down the business. So by creating these different sort of frameworks in advance and educating the business and actually collaborating with the business, we saw really good success because there was one predictability. The business knew when to include us, when they could do something on their own. And it was just really great experience. And I will say, we'd like to focus on 4 different areas to be able to help us pass 80% onto the business so we could focus on the 20% that we thought really mattered. And it was, how do we templatize the standard, the repetitive? How do we triage from riskiest to least riskiest? How do we think about embedding both our people in any particular unit, especially sales and enterprise sales, or customer support, so we could see trends before they happen, but also embedding sort of legal disclosures in the customer flows so that we could scale our own disclosures, transparency. So again, building that trust so customers aren't surprised when something happens, I think is a huge element. And then I would say lastly, probably tools. And that now includes AI tools, but how do we think about tools to be able to speed us along as well? And I think if you are set on your priorities and run your heat map exercises every 6 months or so, can refine those, have OKRs or KPIs to figure out if you're making progress on them. I think that certainly helps in the process and doesn't burn out the team, builds trust with the business. Again, that trust theme, and really results in people not having to work on repetitive and that underbrush of work that I know that I certainly did for many years, but hopefully advances in different frameworks like that, help the overall team and especially the younger team members not have to deal with as much these days, especially with some of the great tools out there now.
Yes. I hope everyone was taking notes. I really do.
Well,
I certainly was.
and I would say, David, I think if I could frame that up, it's all about, and I love baseball. I love my LA Dodgers. And I think I learned this from Mike Jacobson at eBay. It's all about slugging percentage, not batting average. Getting up at bat every time and getting a hit, a single is nice, but it's not as good as taking your time, figuring out how do you get those home runs, those doubles, triples, because you're just going to make much more impact that way.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. I'm stealing that too. I think what we're talking about is the difference between the model of the general counsel, CLO, legal leader as a substantive expert who's reactive, and what you're talking about, which is a true legal leader, which is a proactive role where you take a step back and then you realize that this is much more than reactive substantive advice.
Yeah. And that is very similar, I think, to that sort of 2x2 grid that one of those folks came up with years ago, a lot smarter than me. What are those areas that are important, but not urgent?
Yeah.
And if you're able to focus in that quadrant, and you have to set aside time for that. But I think that is where ultimately leaders and team members should be spending, ideally, more of their time.
Yes, certainly when you're talking about businesses that are not static, that are not stable, that are growing at a dramatic rate, like in the way that both eBay, PayPal, and Upwork and its constituent parts have been growing for quite a long time. Scale is fundamental, right? And if you were to have a legal function that was static and reactive, you'd be in big trouble, right?
Oh, yeah.
You'd be in big trouble. Tons of friction, a lot of don't tell legal.
Yeah, I know you and I have seen that in people's worst days. Yes.
Yeah. And I think both of these companies that you work for have been, all of these companies, let's say, because all of them were numerous businesses at some point, but have all been through this situation where they came on board with a culture different from the one that we're talking about, including with legal functions, right? Like we brought in all kinds of businesses into the eBay family, and all of them, you in particular, were involved with bringing them in and changing the culture and making it a more scalable approach. And then at Upwork, of course, having had so many business roles as well. I think that's a truly important part of the story.
I played a small part, but certainly great to be part. And you make a great point. Integration of M&A is much harder than actually doing the deal because of the personalities involved, because of the financial incentives after someone has gotten a big payday, and what are the retentive effects for the leaders of that team. Culturally, doing cross-border deals really hard, but integrations are the toughest part.
Yeah, and I think like we don't spend enough time, I think, in the in-house leadership part of things, talking about the vision and culture, right? I think that's why I always talk about legal leadership as opposed to general counseling, because the vision, the ability to set that vision and then drive the team in the right direction is a really important part of the qualifications for somebody at that level.
Yeah. And I think, and again, it goes back to trust. Trust doesn't come right off the bat. You have to build it authentically. And how are you able to do that in a impactful way relatively quickly? Because in business, everything is speed too. Like you also can't take forever to build that trust quotient. You've got to be able to hit the ground running.
Yep. Yeah. And I think when you're developing a framework for an organization, whether it's right before you get there or off the bat or even well down the road, having in the back of your mind every single conversation, every single action that a leader makes is about that trust. It's about setting the stage for, and particularly these days, I don't know if you want to say something about change management and change in the market, but it's so important these days to have trust and to drive that change.
Yeah, no, I think people stay when they feel trusted, not managed. And there is an article written many years ago by Michael Lewis, the famous author, about basketball player Shane Battier, who people probably don't recognize his name, but like he was the glue player that won a couple championships with LeBron and Dwayne Wade back in the day. He would play 2% of the time to LeBron's 98%, but the coach brought him in when it really counted to guard the Kobe Bryants of the world because he had studied his craft. He knew which way Kobe liked to turn off the dribble. He was a tenacious passer, rebounder. He did all those little things. And I think leaders and teams that can be that glue, I think are really trusted, not just by the business, but by their own teams. And it's not going to necessarily reflect itself in a performance review, or it's not going to be acknowledged at an all hands meeting every week. But what is that sort of secret sauce or glue that makes the organization runs better? How do you connect people, prevent disputes, build that trust infrastructure? I think that's so important. And I just think that mindset of doing the little things, I think can come back and really help speed up that trust quotient and that flywheel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Brian. Do you have any thoughts about where we're going as a profession, legal leadership or in-house profession or otherwise?
Congrats to you for teaching the course at Florida Law School to be able to give some practical advice about the practice. I think the roles, have shifted so much over the years. It's not just the back room, the lawyers under the green lamps, separate from the business. I think the best legal teams are part of the business, are leaders for the business. We like to call our team at Upwork the Department of How. How can we solve this problem? Not the Department of No with the police stick. You can't do this and we're going to fire you if you don't. I think it's all about creating different frameworks and how do you think about the different audiences at the company, being the internal teams. Like how do you lead a team to fewer surprises, fewer last minute blocks, faster shipping for the business? How do you make sure the execs and the board know what risks are worth taking? What risks are worth avoiding? How do we go about owning outcomes? And then looking out at customers, how do we make customers feel safer over time as trust builds, especially in the era of AI, where machines are taking over a lot and companies need to make sure that their counterparts at other companies, whether it's chief information security officers or the privacy team or the security teams reviewing your contracts, you really have to make them comfortable that you've thought about a framework that makes sense and so that they're not surprised and they do feel safer over time, that there's accountability. You can reverse stuff if need be. And there's just that notice and consent aura, just so there are no surprises. And similar to one of our goals, one of my goals in business is, no surprises, right? That should be a business's goal as well with its customers to be able to build their confidence over time in the product.
Absolutely said. And I think a masterclass in legal leadership there.
I don't know about that, but you're very kind.
I'm taking notes and you can be assured that this will be a piece of content that I use going forward, Brian. I very much appreciate you joining us on the show. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Keep doing what you're doing. Love these podcasts.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone out there for joining us on another episode of the Legal Leaders Podcast. We will see you again soon. Thanks for joining us.